Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the NJC seminar on this year's pay claim for 2021. I'm Sean Fox. I'm currently the chair of the National Joint Council and one of the members for the Greater London region. We're joined today by my fellow executive member Mary Moore from the South East region, and also listening in, but you won't see her on screen, Diana Leach, who's the third member of the lay member executive. Today's seminar is primarily just to talk through the claim and also the process that we're now engaging in terms of trying to win the claim for our members. And there is an opportunity for people to ask questions. That will be using the question box that you'll see on the right hand side of your screen. To start with, I'm going to call in Mike Short, who is our national officer, to do a short presentation on the claim, and then, as I say, there'll be plenty of opportunities for people to questions. So if I can hand over to Mike now. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Excuse me. Thanks very much, Sean. And thanks for coming, everyone. As Sean says, I'm Mike Short. I'm one of the officers involved in the NJC pay negotiations and campaign. I'm going to start by apologising for the curtains behind me. I experimented with blurring it. It just wasn't working for me. Every time I moved my head, and I do move my head a lot, everything went off. So I'm sticking with the flowery curtains. As Sean said, this presentation explains the 2021 NJC pay claim and campaign. And I'm going to flick to it so that I can move to the next slide. There we go. Hopefully you can see the slide I can see. So what is our pay claim? Well, our 2021 pay claim is for an increase of at least 10% on all NJC or GLPC pay points in London. We consulted members on what the claim should be. We offered three options: 5%, which was based on achieving over some years 2/3 median earnings plus inflation, but with a £10 minimum rate; 8%, but with a £10 minimum, which would ensure that the foundation living wage rate applied to everyone; or 10%. Members voted overwhelmingly for the 10% option, and so in the talks with the other unions, GMB and Unite, we made sure that a 10% headline pay claim would be the focus. 10% would lift all pay points above what many call the real living wage, the foundation living wage rate. 10% would also begin to recover the 25% lost in real terms after a decade of cuts and inflation. This next slide takes us back a bit to explain the basics about NJC pay. The NJC pay spine is used by councils and schools to construct local pay grades. Every year, UNISON and the other unions submit a pay claim to the local government association who represent employers. The unions and employers then negotiate. When both sides come to an agreement and the pay offer is accepted following consultations of our members, the increase is applied to the NJC pay spine. London and a few other councils have their own pay spines, but if they follow the NJC pay uplift, they would apply the agreed increase to those spines. Various employers aside from councils also follow the NJC pay increase: academies, some private contractors, some charities, and so on. Let's look at the recent context to our claim. Local government workers have kept the country going during COVID-19. Of course, we know how indispensable local government workers have always been, but the pandemic has made it much more obvious to the public. It's our members in local government that have worked in sometimes risky situations: school support staff providing key worker schooling, refuse collectors, housing workers and social workers who continue to work in people's homes, environmental health officers, and many more besides. Now, it's clear that councils have suffered financially due to the pandemic. They've lost lots of income and they've incurred lots of extra expenditure as the government has piled on more and more responsibilities onto councils because they know councils and their staff will deliver. Now, the government promised to do whatever is necessary, and I quote, to support them, but the extra money the government has put in has been nowhere near enough. Our research shows that councils currently face a £1 billion funding gap, and that's after they have taken the steps necessary to set apparently balanced budgets for the next financial year. Meanwhile, local government staff have lost up to 25% in the value of their pay over the last decade. For many years, members had pay freezes and below inflation increases. We don't need more austerity. We need a decent pay award to begin to recover a lost decade of cuts, austerity and crisis. What's the impact been on our members? Well, since 2010, NJC staff have lost almost a quarter of the value of their pay. Many of those suffering from low pay have been on the front lines dealing with COVID-19, and the prices for everyday goods and household bills continue to rise as the wages stagnate. And we've seen also NJC pay awards fallen below private sector equivalents. A bit more on the impact here with a handy graph. The retail price index is a measure of inflation. It's UNISON's preferred measure of inflation. It shows us how much the cost of everyday things, including bills and housing costs, is rising year on year. And the graph shows that for the last decade, NJC pay awards have always been below the increase in the cost of living. Last year's increase of 2.75% was an improvement on the previous years. And you can see it's getting close to the RPI, but it was still below the RPI, which, as I say, is our preferred measure of inflation. So we've still got a long way to go. This means that staff on NJC pay keep falling behind, and only a substantial pay rise can help staff catch up. Now, this slide talks a bit about low pay, pay at the bottom end. One of UNISON's goals as a union is to achieve a £10 an hour minimum wage for all members across all of the service groups, sectors and employers. You'll no doubt be familiar with the Foundation Living Wage Rate. It's an independently researched rate which is supposed to reflect the true cost of living. That's currently set at £9.50 outside London. In London it's £10.85. But UNISON's policy is more ambitious. There are currently 4 pay points at the bottom of the NJC pay spine below £10 an hour. You can see them on the screen there at 9.25, 9.43, 9.62 and 9.81, and you can see their equivalent annual salaries, full-time annual salaries I should say there as well. A 10% pay rise would lift all 4 of those pay points above the £10 an hour target. Now, of course, it's not just about pay, and it's not just pay that's fallen behind. Most members have experienced cuts to overtime, sick pay and other conditions. In fact, these sorts of cuts have often been employers' first port of call when they want to make cuts, as we've seen over the last 10 years. 28% of local government staff work some unpaid overtime, and that's compared to 15% of other employees, of all employees. And compensating local government workers for that unpaid overtime would require a 25% pay rise. So this year's pay claim is supported by a supplementary conditions claim, looking at things like a home working allowance, annual leave, working hours and parental leave. Those are important issues, but UNISON's focus is the pay claim, as we believe that the most effective way to improve members' terms and conditions is to get them a decent pay increase on a national basis. The 10% pay claim will very much be the focus of our campaign. I want to say a bit about economic recovery and how a decent pay increase can help with that. When the UK starts to recover from COVID-19, it cannot repeat the mistakes of 2010. It's very clear to us all, and we're all familiar with this argument, of course, that the austerity agenda from 2010 onwards, from the coalition and Tory governments, delayed the UK's recovery from the 2008 financial crisis, as well as causing immense and unnecessary pain for working people, and obviously that unfair pain as well. Now, investing in public service workers is an investment in the economy. Aside from the essential work they do, more cash in the pockets of local government workers means more spending in the economy. At the beginning of this year, UNISON commissioned research which shows that 51% of the financial cost of meeting our pay claim would be recovered by the government through increased tax revenue, reduced spending on benefits and tax credits, and through higher spending in local economies. So, you know, the government puts the money in to give our members a decent pay increase. They'll get a lot of that money back because people will be paying more tax. They won't need to have benefits or tax credits, or as many benefits and tax credits, and they'll be spending more and benefiting the economy. So for the government, funding a decent pay increase is nowhere near the outlay that critics would have us believe. And when you couple this with all the tax that major corporations don't pay, the tax that major corporations avoid and evade, and which the government should be going after and pursuing, the conclusion for us is clear. So to summarise the key points about our claim, local government workers have kept the country going during the COVID-19 crisis. They should receive a decent pay increase because investment in local government workers is an investment in the economy and because they deserve it. The government needs to honour their promise to do whatever is necessary to support local authorities, and this includes properly supporting and paying the people who work for local authorities and schools and provide those vital services. Local government employers may say they don't have the money. Well, they need to join us in holding the government to their promise and support a decent pay award. Last year, the Local Government Association ultimately declined to work with us on a joint approach to the government for money for pay. We got the impression from the employers that they might be up for approaching the government alongside us to push for more, but the Local Government Association at its top level opted not to do that. This year, they need to stand up for their own workers. But we're not relying on them, of course, and whether or not they do, UNISON will be campaigning strongly. So just moving on to our campaign. I think most of the people here today will be activists already. We need everyone to get involved in the campaign, and we need everyone to get more members involved in the campaign. Talk to friends and workmates and use our online resources to promote the campaign locally. The link to our campaign page is there. It's unison.org.uk/LG Fair Pay. There are lots of campaign resources there, and we'll be adding more as the campaign progresses. It's really important that we get local councillors to support our pay claim and campaign. We need to get that political pressure from councillors and councils upwards to put pressure on the government. We've got a model motion for councils to debate supporting our claim. That is now live on the website, and it'll be going out in a branch bulletin to all branches, I think, tomorrow. And there's also an email your councillor tool which members can use to generate an email that they can amend and send to their local councillors. It's dead easy, takes a couple of minutes, and we really need that political pressure at all levels. What are the most immediate campaign steps we need to take? Well, there are some things you can do right now while employers are consulting councils on our claim. The employers' side are holding regional briefings on our claim throughout March to get local authorities' views on the claim. So, I mean, I say regional, they're not going around the country like normal, they're virtual briefings, but ask your regional office about participating in the briefings. That might be possible in some areas. It depends what kind of relationships we have with the regional employers' bodies. Also, use this presentation to brief members in your branches and get them involved in the campaign actions. Again, the recording of this webinar is going to go live on the website, and the PowerPoint presentation that I'm using right now is already on the website. This slide says that the employers expect to respond to us in April. Well, we've had a bit of an update since then. They've told us they won't do so until after the local elections on the 6th of May. So we've made clear our dismay about this. You may have seen we put out a press release making that clear on Friday, and we urge them to reconsider. After all, councils and schools already know what their budgets are, so why can't they make an offer? Why can't they negotiate with us? Our members need to know what the situations for their own household budgets as well. I should also mention the mapping and organising work that we need to be doing. Before long, we'll be putting out advice to branches, most of you will be familiar with this, on checking your membership records are up to date and working out which employers are covered by the NJC pay campaign. Of course, many of our members don't work in local authorities or schools which are covered by the local authority. So this work is really important, so we know which members in other employers can be brought into the campaign, getting them involved. When it comes to consulting members and balloting them for action, if we get to that point, we need to make sure we involve all of the members that we should. But in the meantime, let's use the time we have to build our campaign, putting maximum pressure on councillors, on councils and the government, and getting as many members as possible involved. Our members need and deserve a decent pay increase, so let's all get behind the claim and campaign for 10%. Thanks very much, and I'll hand back to Sean now, hopefully.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for the presentation. Just if people haven't noticed, the presentation there's a link, as Mike said, on the website, but there's also a link to it in the questions section. We've had a number of questions come in, and I will attempt to answer some of these, and I'll hand others on to colleagues to pick up. So one particular one that came in was around the consistency of the presentation of the consultation. Just to confirm that the 8 out of 10 that Mike referred to was fairly uniform across the regions that we consulted. Apologies, I think I may have muted myself. Okay, so yeah, we consult branches. So the numbers that Mike were talking about were branch responses rather than individual responses. When we consult members individually when we actually have an offer to consult them on. So just because that may confuse people. I can see another question in relation to building common ground with Unite, and just in terms of that, obviously the reason we delayed putting the claim in is we wanted a uniform claim. We achieved a uniform claim that was agreed by all 3 trade unions. And while Unite are focusing on terms and conditions, they too are clear that we need a decent pay award, and clearly they agreed the uniform 10%. In terms of the other questions that are in there, bear with me a second. I'm just looking at them, and I'll see if I can answer them. I think the issue that's been highlighted is how we actually focus on getting a result. I'm summarising the questions because there are a number which are similar. From our point of view, the reality is we will get an effective pay settlement through 2 routes. We'll get one through us actually campaigning and organising amongst our members and making sure that our employers, i.e. local authorities, are clear that we will not accept further pay freezes, or in fact just further erosion of pay and conditions, because while we haven't had a pay freeze for the last few years, clearly on occasion our pay awards have fallen short. Some of the things that are in the presentation are clearly things we can do practically at the moment in order to raise awareness. But I would say the biggest thing that we can do is obviously engage our members and ensure that our members are in turn putting pressure on their employers. Bear in mind, of course, we are unique amongst public sector in the fact that we, in many cases we elect our employers because we elect local councils. I'm going to hand over to Mary to say some more on that question.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, on that question, yeah, and I know Mike has covered it to some extent in the presentation, but I think we need to remember that austerity didn't work, even on its own terms. It didn't work last time. It's not going to work this time. So to say that the country is poor and we've been made poorer by COVID, it's not really much of an argument. There are better ways, as Mike highlighted, in terms of going after unpaid taxes and all those other things. And I think ultimately as well, in terms of winning the argument, I think we just need to remind people and ask people what they were applauding for on Thursday evenings. Because if they don't recognise now that you deserve this significant pay rise, then when will they? Because this is probably the one time when they really should recognise your value.
Thanks, Mary. I think that's an entirely valid point, and I think it is the point that we're higher profile than we've ever been, I would suggest, at the present time. And another question's come in that I wanted to point in your direction, Mike, if that's okay, which is around a mirror claim for academies and other employers.
Thanks, Sean. Yes, I can't see the actual text of the question on our thing, but yes, that's on our list of materials, resources to produce, and we're working on it, and it'll be with you as soon as we can. So yeah, we normally do, as you say, Sean, a sort of a model claim for academies and a model claim for other outsourced employers, linked NJC employers, that sort of thing, to try and get consistency across the claims. We will be producing those as normal, and they'll be for the same claim, 10%.
Mike, there's an additional question. I've just released a couple that are actually people should now be able to see. Apologies, I hadn't realised that didn't happen until we actually published them, so I've just done that. There's a specific one around the fact that we will not be receiving an offer in time for the anniversary, and why are we not balloting now? I think from my point of view, conference policy has always been very clear that we consult on a final offer. We don't have a final offer to consult on, and then that we make a recommendation on that, and then that we obviously in turn, depending on the outcome of that ballot, move into a formal strike ballot. But is there anything you wanted to add on that?
Well, no, I agree with you, but sorry, you might have missed the beginning there. I'll start again. I agree with you, but in addition, I think it's worth saying that the attempt to get, well, the successful attempt to get trade union unanimity on everything, which was important to us, did delay things by a few weeks. So we just need to be we need to recognise slightly that we did delay things by a few weeks. So we wouldn't want to be too hasty in going straight to an industrial action ballot. I think as well, we need to be cognisant of if and when we do move to an industrial action ballot, when's the best point to do it and have the highest chance of success in there. And I think doing that too soon would be an error, I think.
Thanks, Mike. I can see another question in relation to would there be a joint recommendation from the joint trade unions. Just so people are clear, obviously we would always aim to have a single recommendation on any offer, and in the majority of years we have achieved that. But obviously each trade union's got its own democratic structures, as have we. And it would be wrong for us to seek to impose our views on them, albeit we would always seek to have a single recommendation. So if people recall, last time we had we made no recommendation. The GMB, from recollection, made a recommendation to accept, and Unite made one to reject. So we actually had all three potential outcomes in terms of recommendations. But yes, we would always seek to maintain unanimity, but not at the expense of the views and impressions of our own members. Mike, can I ask you to come in on the question of the fact that some councils appear to be budgeting for a pay freeze in the coming year?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the first thing to say about that is we don't have full information, nowhere near full information, if I'm honest, about what councils are budgeting. But from the anecdotal evidence we have so far, I think there's quite a wide variety of practice going on. Some may be budgeting for a freeze. I think a lot are not. And if anyone's got any information about the budget that any of your councils are setting in relation to pay freeze, it would be great if you could let us know at the NJC pay inbox, because that's really helpful ammunition for us. Well, it might be really helpful ammunition for us, we'll have to see, of course. So obviously, where there are councils who are budgeting for a pay freeze, that's a more difficult, a pay increase is a more difficult sell. And I think that will be tied up in what the politics of that local authority are. But across the board, we don't think that's the pattern. And we understand the advice from above to councils is not to budget for a pay freeze. And, you know, we don't know what, if anything, the employers will offer us, but we understand there'll be a pay offer. We understand there will be negotiations, and we'll see what that comes up with. So we're certainly not giving up because some councils are budgeting for a pay freeze. I realise that if you're in a council where they are doing that, it makes the local arguments more difficult.
Thanks, Mike. There's another question coming about, particularly in the southeast region, where we've got a number of employers who bargain locally, and what we can do effectively to join up the claim with those branches who are opted out of the NJC. I don't know if you or Mary want to take that, Mary being from the southeast as well, so I'll leave that to one of you.
I can kick off if you like. Can you hear me when I'm not on screen? Yeah, there we are. I can kick off, and perhaps Mary will say more about from her experience working in the southeast, organising in the southeast. I mean, the first thing to say is we have produced already, it was some weeks ago, an equivalent claim for opted out local authorities to use, which is based on the NJC claim in the same way that the Academy's one will be, and so on. And that can be used in any opted out local authority. But primarily it's sort of used in the southeast because that's where we've got a lot of opted out local authorities. So that's the first thing you can do, is use that pay claim as a basis for your local pay negotiations. Obviously you're free to amend it as you like, and that gives us uniformity in what we're asking for. And actually then a lot of the materials that we've produced already and that we are producing can quite easily be adapted, so that the PowerPoint's got, that we just saw, has some stuff about NJC, but all the sort of artwork and so on is about fair pay now, so that can quite easily be used. We're going to be producing some sort of recruiters guides, recruiter scripts to use. That again, that can easily be used. You just have to adapt it at times. And a lot of the social media presence we have, usable as well. So I think there are lots of things we can do. The other thing is perhaps if you've got an idea of what your timetable is going to be, or it may already be in progress for your pay negotiations, then let us know, and we can see to what extent the two are together, because then we can have joint, we can have joint messaging and that sort of thing. I don't know if Mary's got something to add. I think actually, Sean, that's about. Oh, here she.
I can see Mary shaking her head, so I think she's taking the view you've covered it. Mike, there's a particular question, and clearly I've got a view on it, but I wanted to see what your view is as the national officer is around what we're doing to achieve political support, particularly obviously from the Labour Party. Now, clearly, that is an important part of our campaign and always would be. But I wondered if you wanted to add something on how we might do that. I mean, obviously you've referred to the motion we've got for local councils to adopt, and the pressure that we can apply via that sort of route. But is there anything you wanted to elaborate on that?
There are different levels. There are different levels, Sean. I think I'm sure I won't say anything that you wouldn't say, but yeah, I mean, I've mentioned the initial stuff, which is for the motions and the email tool, which is for, if you like, at the local level, and that's not just about the Labour Party. That can be used for any colour of council in terms of political party colour, but probably going to get more out of Labour councils than other parties, although I know some of you might differ depending on your local experience. I don't know. We've got good relationships with the LGA Labour group, so that's the national organisation of Labour councillors within the LGA, and in the past, we've tried our best to exert influence on them. There are some years when we gather from behind the scenes at the LGA that the discussions they have about the payoff are kind of, there's no party political divide. There are other years where it does seem like Labour have wanted one thing, the Tories have wanted another. Sometimes, I think there was one year where the Lib Dems outflanked the Tories to the right and didn't want to offer anything. Don't quote me on that. Can't remember what year it was. So, I think that the dynamics change each year, but we certainly will be applying as much pressure as we can behind the scenes on the LGA Labour group to get them to talk up a big offer behind the scenes. Now, I saw the question. There's also a reference, as you'd imagine, to MPs and the National Labour Party. And yes, we'll be lobbying in the weeks, months to come. We'll be lobbying the Labour Party nationally to support our claim through Labour Link, as you'd imagine. I think the question also mentioned writing to MPs. Yeah, that's not a tool we've got at the moment, but it's something we'll look into. It's interesting because we are actually, as part of the service group's anti-cuts campaign, we're doing a lot of work getting members, particularly in certain target constituencies, to write to their MPs. So we'll have a think about how we can perhaps bring those two together, because I think what we're trying to do is make sure that our campaigns are one big pro-local government campaign. I think in the past our pay campaign and our cuts campaigns have been quite separate, and I think it would be helpful to both campaigns to bring them together and be making one point about what our members deserve, what they need, and where the money should come from. Thanks. Thanks,
Mike. There are obviously a number of questions in the chat that people will be able to see. I think a lot of them take a similar theme actually around political pressure. So I think you've covered those, and I wasn't going to suggest we said anything additional on those at the moment. One question that does seem to have come up relates to the fact that some councils are actually using our argument against us in terms of full funding for the claim. So in effect, local authority, we're obviously saying that the claim needs to be funded, something I think we all accept. Otherwise, it will have to be paid out of elsewhere from existing budgets. But how we counter that argument that, okay, we can't make you a decent pay offer because there isn't decent funding to go with it. So can I point that one at you, Mike?
Of course you can. I think we need to be quite careful with what we're saying. I think we're saying, and I hope this is what I said in the presentation, that councils would need funding support from the centre in order to pay a 10% pay increase. I don't think it's true that they need support from the centre to make any pay increase. So if they're using our arguments to justify budgeting for a pay freeze, we will say that's unacceptable. And as I say, there are plenty of authorities which are budgeting for a pay increase. So I think where you've got councils saying, well, you know, we need to freeze pay, and you yourselves are saying there's no money. We're not saying there's no money. We're saying there needs to be more money, and our members deserve more. We're certainly not saying that that councils have no money for pay, and it wouldn't be true to say that. I mean, you know, to be frank, we had a similar slant last year, and some councils probably tried to use argument against us last year, but they all managed to pay a 2.75% pay increase last year.
Thanks, Mike. There's an additional question around timing in terms of consultation, and I've never been on a standing orders committee, a local government conference. Thankfully, it's not something I've had to fulfil. But the question essentially is, will we be able to debate pay at conference if we're still in a period of negotiations in June? And obviously that's subject to whether we're able to have what sort of conference we're able to have in June, I guess, as well. But I think clearly it's not something that's in our gift as an NJC. But clearly, if it is possible, then it's a matter for the Standing Orders Committee to enable debate as best they can. Mary, did you want to add to that?
No, just I was actually just going to agree with you. Actually, that would be something for standing orders rather than a decision for NJC.
Thanks, Mike. Anything to add on that?
Yeah, I'll say a little bit. Just that, you know, there are talks still going on about what a virtual conference might look like in June, and the NEC has some decisions to make, and as you say, standing orders have some decisions to make, and I dare say the SGE will be asked for their input as well. What we know is that there won't be as much opportunity to debate quite so many motions as normal, and they might have to limit it to certain themes. So if people want a particular theme to be considered as a theme for debate, it would be worth getting in touch just to let us know, but we're nowhere near that decision yet. But certainly if that's what people want, then they should get in touch.
Thanks, Mike. There's a question which I think is an entirely valid one, which I'm going to attempt to answer myself and then ask colleagues to expand on, which is how will this campaign be different or ultimately more successful than the last one? I think it's a valid point, and my honest answer is it'll be down to our ability to organise and pressurise both the employers and actually engage our members in it, because the important thing to remember is our members make the final decision on a pay offer. In the meantime, we need to use the space and time we've got between now and May to pressurise the employers. Ultimately, a recommendation will come from the NJC, and just so people are clear, the only reason there wasn't a recommendation on the last pay offer was because actually the NJC was literally split 50-50. It wasn't a conscious decision not to make a recommendation, and it wasn't it was actually just the sheer fact that the vote was exactly level between members of the committee. I think it is important that we try and engage our members. I appreciate that's actually quite difficult at the moment, mostly because a lot of them are sitting behind screens such as the ones we are today. But we can use that time in terms of some of the instant messaging and the like, actually to our advantage, in terms of emailing, in terms of online meetings, in terms of actually getting people engaged and interested in the offer. But the biggest thing we need to do is actually give our members the belief that we can win the offer, and that that they deserve the offer. I think that is the most important message that I think Mary touched on it earlier. Our members have fallen behind. Our members have been out there in the front line, in schools, in social care, in other areas, actually delivering services. And I think that's the message we need to say. The immortal phrase is, "We are worth it." Michael, Mary, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I can if you like. I think there was a follow-on question, Sean, about, you know, will the campaign publicity look different in terms of TV adverts, newspaper articles? I don't know about TV adverts, to be honest. Newspaper articles, yes, and certainly in the local government sector, press as well. I mean, I think we need to think carefully about who we're trying to influence and what they read and what kind of pressure they respond to. But yeah, we're considering all of those things, and also doing a lot more on social media, and not just like posting on social media, but advertising on social media, that sort of thing. So those things are all being considered, and anyone's got any new or different ideas, you know, feed them through to us at the inbox or through your region's NJC reps as well. Thanks, Mike.
I can see another question that's just come in about the campaign needs to be national, not local, and actually, I want to be clear with people. Clearly, we make a national pay claim. We negotiate with the national employers, but in the reality of the way that local government is constructed is that the pressure, we also need to apply the pressure locally, because the employers consult their members in the same way we do before they make an offer and before they decide on their position on pay. So I think it is really important not to view those two things as mutually exclusive. We're not saying to branches go out and campaign on your own. Clearly, we will provide the materials. We will do the negotiations. But the point is that actually we need some upwards pressure as well as some downwards pressure. A pay award won't be won because 4 people sit in a room and make compelling arguments. It'll be won because the employers think they've got no choice but to make us a decent offer. I think that is really the message that members across the country need to see. That's how we've won previous offers. That we and ultimately, if we don't get the offer we want and members are feeling confident enough, then they'll have options to enforce that. Mary.
Yeah, just to really reiterate what you're saying there about the importance of local involvement. There's the webpage, the link to send an email to your councillor. That's really useful. But also, although Mike says that we're not going to get a response to the claim before their local elections, that doesn't mean to say that you can't be challenging the candidates on the doorstep. Assuming they come to your doorstep or when they phone you, and just ask them outright, what is their position on the pay claim, and literally put their money where their mouth is. There's a motion. UNISON's come up with a model motion for council. If they're an existing councillor, then ask them to propose that motion at council. So yeah, to reiterate that really, that the local pressure is really important, and that's down to members to be taking up, and to their friends and colleagues to take up with local councillors.
Thanks, Mary. No, I think that is the point. Ultimately, most local councillors receive very small amounts of correspondence. If they receive a significant number, which I was once told is more than about 10 actually, in their inbox about a single subject, they become interested and worried about it, particularly during election time. Mike, one for you. Around coordination across service groups in terms of pay claims in general. So I wonder if you could pick that up.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, so the question is the local government service group coordinating pay claims and campaigns with other service groups? Well, the short answer is yes. I think, I mean, it's the age-old problem, isn't it, in Unison, the age-old issue where all the different bargaining groups have different timetables and different processes and procedures and so on. And I think actually, we're ahead of the game compared to other service groups and sectors and behind others. But yes, I think under the purview of the NEC, a sort of cross-service group has been set up to implement and work on our campaign against the pay freeze. Now, I'm on this group and I've repeatedly made the point, well, we're not accepting the premise of the question there for local government. We're not accepting there's a pay freeze. We've put in a pay claim. We've been told they're going to be doing regional briefings and they're going to respond to our pay claim. But nonetheless, we are working and coordinating with the other service groups, trying to get common messaging, that sort of thing, share ideas. And hopefully that there'll be more of that. We're also using that group to link into the TUC's work. I don't know if any of you were involved in the event in February the TUC ran, which is an anti-pay freeze thing. But there's going to be a big event, I think, in March and one in May, I think. Don't quote me on that, I don't have the dates on me. But the point is, within that, I need to, while we're trying to get common messaging and all that sort of thing across the groups, we don't want to go too far in terms of it being about a pay freeze in local government, because, as I say, we're not accepting there is a pay freeze in local government, and we don't want to be giving the employers a chance to say, well, you say there's a pay freeze, it's fine, you've accepted it. We certainly don't accept that. But yes, we're working with the other groups.
Thanks, Mike. There's a lengthy question in the chat that I'm going to summarise around us actually relating the reality of how we can pay for a decent pay award, and also in terms of issues such as tax evasion, and the fact that there is, there are potentials for windfall taxes and the like. So, can you pick that one up?
That was for me, was it, Sean? Yeah, I don't have the question in front of me, but I mean, yeah, I said a bit about this in the presentation. Absolutely, I mean, you don't need me to start preaching, but there's lots of sources of money in the economy. I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because at the moment, the parties seem to be competing for who can not tax. And I think there's an issue about which form of tax is the fairest. You know, council tax has gone up this amount, and you know, councils which haven't put it up for years, they can't raise that much by putting it up anyway. Business rates have had business rate, but you know, businesses have had business rates holidays. Ultimately, this, you know, the full 10% claim should be funded by general taxation, and I absolutely agree. There are corporations avoiding and evading tax. That's always been the case, but this has become a much bigger issue in recent years, with companies based at the Amazons and Googles of this world, which basically owe the country billions. And yeah, the government should be going after that, and there should be a political campaign to go after that. So sorry, I don't have the question in front of me, but if that's the kind of thing we're being asked, then yes, absolutely agree.
Apologies, I thought I'd put it into the chat and I hadn't. So yes, that. I think you have covered it, Mike. I think it is important, and I know obviously at a service group level there have been previous discussions about how we might properly fund local government and what that might look like. But also, clearly the union during the last election campaign was very clear we needed more money for public services in general, and more money for public services would mean better services and clearly more pay for our members.
Mike, I think we've lost Sean there, so if I don't know if you wanted to take over on the Q&A front.
I can do, or Mary, would you like to? I don't know what's happened to Sean.
Yeah, it looks like he's cut out.
I think he's back.
Apologies, everyone. Sorry, it's the wonders of this new technology, isn't it, that we're all using. I am indeed back. So, okay, in terms of further questions, I say that there's one specifically around branches who've got where the employers indicated that they've budgeted for zero, but will use the reserves. And Mike, can I ask you to pick that one up in terms of what our view is on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think our position on use of reserves, not just for pay, but actually our position on use of reserves to bridge any urgent funding needs is not ideal. I mean, it's hard to comment in general, because you know, councils, like any organisation, should build up enough reserves for a rainy day. And then, you know, you could argue that COVID-19 is a rainy day, and a pay increase, a necessary pay increase for workers when there's not enough money for it, which is what they're arguing. I'm not saying we accept that, is another rainy day. So I think better that they use their reserves than start doing something worse, like refusing to pay the NJC pay increase, break away from the NJC pay increase, that sort of thing. But what I think we want from those councils is we need to be saying to them, it's using your reserves, good, but this money is a year-on-year increase. It's not a one-off. The 2.75 last year is still there. It doesn't disappear a year later, and that'd be the same with whatever comes this year. So that council has an even greater responsibility to join us in our campaigning for more money. And so if that council is refusing to pass our motion, or at least debate our motion, if those councillors are there, certainly the Labour ones, particular Labour ones, are refusing to sort of get involved in our campaign and support it, then we need to be asking why, because their goal becomes the same as ours in a sense. So you know, I think we can perhaps accept what they're doing, but turn it round to help get them on board with our longer term campaign for more funding for pay and services.
Thanks, Mike. A couple more questions that have come in. One, I think you may have covered in the presentation, but I know it's something that we want to have a look at. So would it be good to highlight some human stories to illustrate the effects of the long-term pay freezes on staff? So I know this comes up every time in terms of case studies, but did you want to say something on that, Mike, perhaps?
Yeah, it's a really good idea. I mean, I think some members are more keen, some more reluctant than others to talk about such sort of personal stuff, but it's certainly on our campaign plan to try and seek out people who are willing to talk about the human impacts. And because, you know, we had a slide in this presentation, didn't we, that talks about the impacts on members, but it was necessarily very general, and you know, certainly in terms of, we understand that those sort of macro arguments, but in terms of getting noticed in the press and media and social media, I think those human stories do work, and it, as I say, it is on our campaign plan to try and find them. So if people know of members who'd be prepared to talk about that kind of thing, if regions know of them, then please do let us know, because we can definitely use them. Obviously, we would talk to the members to see what we can do. Thanks, Mike.
Another question that's come in. Would there be more campaigning or lobbying activity in those regions that rejected the pay offer last time? Mike, do you want to pick that one up?
I mean, the short answer is I don't know. It's up for regions and it's up to regions and the branches within them to come up with their own, you know, campaigning plans. Perhaps should have said at the outset, we've sent a branch campaign template to every branch, and we've sent a regional campaign template to every region, and we would hope that they would be debated and used as a basis for a campaign in every branch and region on this. I would hope there'll be a strong campaign in every branch. I'd hope there'll be a strong campaign in every region. So I wouldn't really want to get into the business of sort of saying to particular regions, well, you had this result last time, so you should be doing this time. I mean, obviously we should all be looking at what's happened in previous years and learning from that. So you would hope that every region, I'm sure they are, is looking at the result they got and how their campaign went last time, and trying to learn from that and make the campaign even more effective this time. But from a national perspective, I don't think we'll be sort of pinpointing regions saying, well, you got this result, you need to do that.
Thanks, Mike. I tend to agree with that. I mean, obviously it's a national claim, and it'll be a national settlement, and you know, we need to apply the pressure pretty uniformly across them. That said, we may choose to target certain key or strategic councils, and we have done in the past. Just for people's benefit, in terms of the case studies and the question that came up earlier, the email address is in the chat, if people, and it's actually already the one that's always on the bulletins anyway. But yeah, we would be particularly keen to look at what we can do in terms of some real human stories, because I think people can relate to those a lot more than sort of theoretical kind of, you know, our members are hard up, they need a pay rise type stories. There's a question which is an entirely valid one that I'm going to attempt to answer myself, which is, does the NJC team have a bottom line for negotiations for the recommendation to accept, for example, 5%? The simple answer is no, we do not, because we will look at an offer. We'll clearly take soundings from lay member colleagues on the NJC, which has got representatives from every region across England, Wales, and the North of Ireland, and we will then take a view. We'll probably, you know, clearly it's always a consideration for us, how deliverable do we think any kind of rejection would be, because simply saying no to an offer is easy. Actually doing something to make that offer get improved can be more difficult, and people will be aware. Clearly, you know, if we're in a situation where we get an offer, or we get no offer for that matter, we get, you know, for some reason they decide to offer us 0, then the clear view of the NJC committee is we would want to take soundings from branches on that. As I said, the only reason we didn't make a recommendation last time was because we literally voted 14-14 on a recommendation of accept or reject. But I think the important point to make is ultimately our members will make a decision. But if we think the offer is not sufficient, then we will be clear with members that we think they should reject it. Unless I'm missing some, I can't see any further questions. So I'm going to, I think what I might do, if it's all right with you, Mike, is to hand back to you briefly if you want to make any closing comments or remarks that, in terms of things people might do.
Sean, I think Mary wants to come in on the last comment.
I do apologise, Mary. I'm not paying attention to my screen. So, Mary, go ahead.
Thanks, Sean. That's fine. It's just that there has been a comment in the Q&As from somebody saying that they've actually their councillors come in under budget despite COVID, and it's to do with the way that they have been claiming all the funding available to them. And it just occurs to me that that's quite a useful thing to know, so that when you're getting the inevitable response from some councillors that they simply can't afford the 10% pay increase or a decent pay increase, to actually ask them what have they done to try and mitigate, what have they claimed for, and see if there are other avenues that they could have been exploring. But that's useful to know. So thank you for that comment.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, I think it is a valid point, and I know certainly some councils, including my own, suddenly said, "Oh, we're a lot better off than we expected to be," following the last tranche of money from the government, which is unusual for a London council. As I say, there are no further questions in the chat, but I've just seen one that's just popped in. Apologies regarding could we say some more about the terms and conditions claim? Mike, are you okay to handle that? And then if Mary and I want to add to it.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Could I just briefly comment on the last bit as well, on the Suffolk one? In that we do know if there are other councils as well which have ended up with a surplus or an underspend. In fact, a colleague and I met with an MP last week to try and get this particular MP to lobby the government more forcefully for more money for local government. And he said, well, my local council's got an underspend, so I can't really go to the government and ask for more money for them. Obviously, those kind of councils are more the exception than the rule, but it does show that it's out there, and obviously they should be doing something with that underspend, like, you know, paying our members. Terms and conditions claim, don't have it in front of me, but yeah, I mean, there was some debate in the NJC committee about whether we wanted conditions in the pay claim. It was agreed very clearly we did not. Unite wanted a conditions claim, and they wanted conditions in the claim, so the compromise was we ended up with a separate conditions claim. I mean, it talks about reducing the working week by 2 hours, increasing annual leave, bringing in a home working allowance, and also a home working policy, and a review of shared parental, maternity, paternity and adoption leaves, that sort of family of child and baby related leaves, if you like. Now, some of those things, in theory, I think the employers could offer something on, but they are mostly things which are either locally negotiated or they're things which are nationally negotiated, but which they've made clear for a long time they're not going to negotiate on. So the one area where I think is a kind of a newer area is home working, and that is obviously a big issue for a lot of our members. A lot of us are working from home and used to be, and that causes issues, and the claim for home working payment and better policies, better health and safety around home working, all that sort of thing. And these are all valid issues that we need to get into. I think, however, home working is complicated. I think a home working policy, if it's not done carefully, would work in different ways for people who travel from their home, and whether the first journey counts as being from, you know, the journey to the workplace, and all that sort of, those travel time issues could start applying to social workers and housing workers and many other people. So we do need to be wary of those things as we get into this. I suspect that kind of policy is something where the employers might just say, well, we'll do a review of it, we'll do some joint work. I may be wrong, of course. I'm speculating there. So those are the things which are in the claim. Our focus, as I say, is on the pay claim, and that's not me saying that. That's the clear decision of the NJC committee. And so I'll be honest, the materials, the campaign materials that we are producing will be focused on the pay claim. Thanks,
Mike. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I mean, as Mike said, it really was, our focus was very clearly on the pay, because ultimately we can have all the extra annual leave or the shorter working week. If we actually don't have any money to do anything with it, it doesn't solve our problems. That said, we do know that some of the Green Book conditions are now effectively 25 years old, and could do with updating and improving. And so we'll never reject any attempt from the employers to improve them. But we also know from previous work that the majority of local authorities have already negotiated on many of those areas anyway, and in fact they're often above the Green Books and the national agreement standards. Mike, there's one additional question which I'm going to attempt to answer, but I may also leave it to you and Mary to see if you want to add anything. So it's a very reasoned question. Obviously, we've had a reduction of 25% in our real terms pay over the last decade. 10% doesn't really cover the loss, does it? Clearly, we could have put in a claim for 25%. The view of members when we consulted them was that 10% was the right approach. But I think we all reckon that's part of the argument for 10%, really, that giving 10% only actually gives people back less than half of what they've already lost in real terms. So actually it's not so unreasonable or extortionate as some may seek to paint it. Also, of course, it's a catch-up approach that you start to erode the losses. We could have, if people had wanted 25% as a claim, then that would be the claim that had gone in. Mike or Mary, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I can if you like, Sean. I mean, I think you covered it really, but it's probably worth saying that, I mean, the question's right, isn't it? That yes, on average, members have lost 10% in real terms. 25% over the last decade. So 10% doesn't cover that. The claim is for a substantial increase of at least 10%. I mean, as Sean said, members voted overwhelmingly. I think we said 8 and 10. It was actually 88% of branches that had a majority for the 10% claim. We didn't get any comments through the consultation back suggesting something higher. And I think we're accepting that, yeah, 10%, if it were achieved, would be the beginning of a process.
Thanks. A couple of questions that have also come in. So just to highlight that the terms and conditions claim will be added to the website for people's information, and obviously you may care to use it locally as well in terms of improving standards if you find that your own basic entitlements on those areas are less than generous. Just to highlight to people, there is a frequently asked questions part on the national website, and the link is in the questions for people. I'm not seeing any further questions at this point. So looking at the time, and that we are pretty much on the dot of 1:30. I think if we wrap things up there, and thank you all for your time. Be safe out there, and let's get active and let's get organised in getting this claim for our members that they so richly deserve. Thank you very much all.